Alright, I want to walk you through the process of this painting. It's a self-portrait and it's situated in what I consider an impossible lighting situation that was really hard for me to figure out and was probably way out of my comfort zone. But it turned out alright, I guess. Here we see the first stage. I did a pencil outline using a grid. It was actually surprisingly hard to get rid of the grid again. It was quite persistent. I had to paint over it multiple times. You can also see that I redrew the outline immediately with dark paint. That is because this is going to be painted over a lot of times and it needs to shine through. It was actually a struggle bringing it back time after time. Maybe I should go for a different technique next time. You can also see in this stage that there's already something wrong with the eyes. At this point I couldn't really figure out what it was, but eventually I did. So let's move on to the next stage. I did a lot of underpainting here. You can see I painted the figure in orange, which is remotely what the skin is resembling or what I want to shine through, maybe a bit at the end. Maybe it even doesn't shine through, but it's just nice to have some color everywhere on the canvas. At first I imagined this being like a sunset scene. I don't know why I did that, but I was actually horrified later of painting myself in a sunset scene, so I abandoned that idea pretty quickly. But you can actually see in the sky that there's still some orange paint, some orange underpainting shining through. I did the sky mostly with a fan brush, which I never used to blend, but I watched a tutorial where it was shown that it works quite good for blending, and I experimented with that and I can agree it works pretty well actually, despite using acrylics, because acrylics dry pretty quickly and normally blending is quite hard. But I use acrylics combined with a dry retarder. Yes, that's the actual name of it, and it works pretty well for me. So here you can see the sky is pretty much finished, and I tried to go to the first stage of the waterfalls. But this first color is actually still some kind of underpainting, and I want it to shine through later maybe. This is the basic color of the waterfall. However, just the basic color of the water, not the foam yet. You can already see a lot of the figure, especially the hair, is lost and I have to bring it back later. I imagined a lot of the scene being illuminated by the sky only. That's why you see me trying to paint those blue highlights on the stone cliffs on the sides. But at this point they are pretty messed up and I'm going to fix them later. So here you see it's starting to take some shape. And that was probably the funnest part too. For the water right there, right and left in the foreground, I used a very big brush, around 5 centimeters. Just painting all that foam, all that sprinkling water was very satisfying. I'm using different size brushes depending on how distant the water is. I use the biggest obviously in the foreground, and that really gives the whole thing a lot of depth, I feel. This foam layer is like the shadow layer that I was talking about. There's no real light of the light source applied to it yet. It's only illuminated by bounce light, so the sky pretty much. The next step will be to actually flip on the lights. Okay, here we go, lights on. I fixed the lighting on the rocks too. I'm assuming that the main light of the sun is barely making it over those cliffs and those waterfalls, and it's illuminating the other side of the falls. But there is no direct light hitting the figure actually. It's a complex lighting situation and most of the lower half of the painting is in the shadows. But I have to somehow light the figure, and we'll see in a moment that this is going to be complicated. You can see that I've already tried to do some more underpainting on the figure, to have a bit more variety in the tones. I don't really have a plan right now for how the skin tone is going to be, but I have to figure that out now. This is the first stage of the skin tone. You can see I painted over the orange and I mixed the skin color with blue. So I would assume that the skin tone is mixing with blue and that makes a greenish grayish color pretty much. You can see at this point there's still a lot of orange shining through, but a lot of that is getting lost in a moment. The shadow color is provisional at this point because it is way too dark. And I still haven't fixed the eyes. Now here's a lot more detail. You see I settled for a base skin tone and I'm already painting what I'm assuming is the light source that is lighting the front of the figure. It's a bit based on a ridiculous assumption, which is that the light from the waterfall is like bouncing onto my chest and that is what is mainly lighting the figure, which is kind of physically impossible, but I guess that's what we're going with here. At this point, I feel like I messed it up. The lighting on the figure is completely rubbish and that's the feeling I get within most of my paintings at some point. Like, man, this is not going to work out. But now it looks a lot better already on the chest. For some reason I decided that my stomach muscles on the left side of the body are being lit, which doesn't make a lot of sense assuming that the only light is coming from the waterfall. And also at this point I'm totally undecided how the bounce light of the water, of the foam, is lighting the figure. I actually had to do another render to get a clearer picture of how that works. So now we got some hair and it's starting to look way better already. At this point I actually decided that the back of the head is receiving a bit light from the main light source, which is the sun. And still no fixed eyes. When am I going to fix them? Now I'm going to fix them. You can see a very big difference in the whole lighting of the face now. That's after doing another render and deciding that there would mostly be a greenish light source coming from below. Actually it's bluish, but it's mixing to a sort of greenish tone with the skin tone. And I fixed the eyes, so I'm actually looking at you now. And what really amazed me was the fact that the greenish bluish color of the light and the upper lip, which was reddish of course, they are complementary and they mix to a grayish tone, which looks very natural to me. But there's still a lot of changes to come. I showed the painting to someone and they said actually that the eyes looked too dark for it to be me. So I lit them up a bit. I did some corrections on the whole proportions and defined the stomach muscles a bit more, which is maybe a bit too much, but yeah, I guess I gotta hit the gym hard to catch up with that. I added some splashes in the foreground so that you actually feel like the figure is in the water, in the foam, and is really part of the scene and not like glued onto it. You can see I added some more brownish tones to the skin, which makes it look a bit more alive, I think. And I did a minor correction on the shoulder because I felt like the transition was too harsh. I added the top light and I'm assuming it is a blue skylight. Maybe it is too weak, I'm not sure. You can barely see it on the forehead and on the hair and the shoulder, and it was kind of hard for me to figure out a tone for this. Well, eventually I feel the painting turned out nicely. I'm currently trying to get back into painting a bit more since art studies kind of messed that up for me. So thanks for watching and I'm curious on your impressions on this piece. Bye bye.